There's a long list of things that are going to happen to everybody. I forgot to unmute myself. I forgot to. These are the phrases of 2020.
All right, looks like we're recording.
We are recording.
Got it. All right, I'm gonna hop off. Have a good meeting, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Give people some more time, but just a quick FYI, Ryan is unfortunately not feeling great today, so he asked me to run the agenda while he gets better.
I'm very sorry to hear that. You know what, I'm gonna just mark that Ryan sends regrets or something like that. So people aren't surprised that he's not there. I gotta spell his last name correctly. Haning, 1 N, correct?
Correct.
Actually, I guess 2, but you know what I mean. Oh. Oh, I'm the host, so I gotta actually push this admit button. This is new for me.
Hello.
Hi there.
You pressed the admit button for me. Thank you.
Yes, sorry about that. I just became the host. I didn't realize I was going to be the host for this meeting. So.
Oh, okay.
But I think that our normal host, she had to do double duty on 2 different meetings at the same time. So.
Oh no.
So. So you're getting the second string here today.
Well, I'm not so sure about that.
Okay, Dan Middleton is just joining. For those who just joined, we are recording. So please don't say anything you didn't want recorded.
And also Ryan is sick today. He's not feeling good, so he asked me to run the agenda. So I'm sharing now. Everybody should be able to see my screen. Okay, should we get started? It looks like we've got quorum. I will remind everyone to sign in again. I see some people in the Zoom that are not signed in here. And then we can jump in. So here's the agenda for today. Ryan put this together last night, I think. If you have any other topics you want to cover, go ahead and add them up in the next section up here, and we can get to those after. All right, looks like first we have an update on the 1029 press release from Kay. I think Kay is here.
Yes. Hi, I was just hitting the mute button. Yeah, so first thing I wanted to do is talk about the Get Involved work that we're doing related to the press release. It actually ties to a couple of things. So what we're doing is we're updating the text on the OpenSSF homepage. Actually, Dan or anyone, I think I'll try to take the screen for a second and then I can walk through.
I think you can just take it over.
It says not. I cannot start screen share while other participant is sharing.
I just said multiple participants can share simultaneously.
Oh, so try again?
Try again.
Okay.
And I hit pause on mine. So.
Okay. So. All right.
Choose options.
So.
Whoops. Didn't seem to do anything. Yeah, Dan,
I-
Dan, can you oh, there we go.
Now, can you see flying geese?
I can.
Perfect. Okay, so so we have, there used to be a join button up here in the top right corner. We've changed that now and it says get involved. And we're going to be modifying the text here to just to expose more information for participants who are, you know, first having a look at our project. And so specifically under the participate in OpenSSF, we want to include each of the projects and open governing board subcommittees and have a short text description of those along with a link that goes back to the README document for more information about how to get involved. For the press release, we want to have something similar. In fact, maybe it's the same thing. So we want to list each of the working groups and public subcommittees, have a short description of those along with a link that goes to more information. So that's the content that we want. We want the name of the working group or committee, a short description, and then a link to the README. So a next question is, where do we get that content? One place we can get it is from the README itself. So now I'm just looking at, this happens to be the planning committee, but we could look at any of the working groups. So if we have a consistent place in the README, we can pull that short description from there. Another thing I was looking at just last night is each of the in GitHub, there is a description field for the working groups, and that's what shows up under the pinned repositories. So it was striking me as convenient if we had the descriptions be on the repository themselves. And here's where you can see that. So if I go back. So up here in the, I think this is where I found it. No, it's here. So over on the right-hand side, when you're looking at the repository, there's an about section. And if you go here, there's a place where you can put a description. So I am currently thinking, but it's, you know, open for suggestions, that if we ask each of the owners of the working groups to fill in this about section with a short description of their project, they can then, you know, copy that and reuse it in the README. But if it's here and about, then it automatically shows up for the pinned repositories, and that gives us a convenient place to pull that information for the web page and for the press release. So what do folks think about that, about using the description field in the about?
So you can also commit that, I think, in a .settings file. There's probably a way that you could reference the same text between the README and the settings file if you did that.
Okay, someone had mentioned that, or Mark had mentioned that earlier. Where's the .settings file at?
You have to commit one, but I think a lot of these configuration items for the GitHub repository can go into a settings file, and then you just commit that into the repo. I think oh yeah, it should be under .github.
Okay.
Yeah, there.
Interesting. This, oh, it's because, so right now this is out of sync with the description that shows up.
That's interesting. I wonder if it gets overridden if you manually.
If I manually did it. Okay. Well,
Yeah,
I could play with that, but I'm not sure I want to do that right now while we're on our call. I'm, you know, if I'm fine with saying the .settings file is the description in the .settings file is the place that we want everyone to fill out.
mean, either way, you probably want to have it also in the README file and try to link those together. So whether you say put it in the README text or the .settings file, probably 6 in one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah, I think we do want it in either the .settings file or manually, just so that we have consistency for these pinned, what shows up in the pinned repositories as well.
Yeah, but obviously that has to be short.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so yeah, all right. It could be that this is gonna. I think the short description, the description, the size that goes into the pinned repositories is what we want on the web page.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, but something like a sentence is basically what you're looking for there.
Yeah, or a couple of short sentences, not much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there was a question, is there a how's the oh, Dan did send mail yesterday and asked people to update their README. So this would be a second request to update settings.yaml file. So let's see, how can I help with this? Maybe should I create issues for each of the working group leads and to ask for the description to be completed? And I'll do some checking ahead of time to make sure that the settings file works. And then I can just ask people to update the settings file. Does that sound good?
There might be a settings issue in the TAC repo. I can't find it live at the moment. Oh, there it is. Add settings to TAC repo. I don't know if somebody wants to build out a template within that issue, and then you could just link to that so that there's some consistency and you don't have to do the same thing in 6 other places.
What's the issue number?
16. So it's intended, I think, for just the TAC repo as it was originally written, but maybe it could just be generalized to a general .settings structure for the other repos.
Okay, let me do a little work on that offline, and then I'll send an email out once I've once I've created an issue or multiple issues and be clear about what I've done. Dan Lawrence, does that sound sense to you?
Yeah, so just to step back up, everybody needs to write up those descriptions, as Ryan said yesterday. And then, so I'm rereading his email. So he doesn't actually call out anything about the 1 or 2 sentences in his email.
Yeah, I was noticing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just figure out what exactly you need for the press release, and then make sure that we have an issue tracking it, either like one issue with the TAC repo with a checklist of all the groups, or one issue per group.
Okay.
And then we can figure that out. Yeah, because I'm rereading his email and it's not clear that if people follow all this, then you're going to get what you need.
I was thinking
Press
that last night. Yeah, because it's got mission, scope, objective, but none of those are crisp about the the short 1 to 2 sentence description. Okay.
Yeah, and since we need this soon, I guess we should try to get these filed today so we can start tracking them.
Okay.
If possible. What is the deadline again for these?
Well, we want it by the 15th, and so the press release so it's in draft form right now, and the 15th is when we have it mostly final. So then at that point we'll have PR folks from other companies and such start reviewing it, and then it goes out on the 29th. So ideally I'd have these by Thursday, and then they could be reviewed at the planning meeting next Monday. make sure that they look good for the press release, and then they get into the press release by Wednesday.
Okay,
All right.
yeah, so if we need it in 2 days, definitely get the issues filed today.
All right,
Okay.
I'll do it.
Cool. And then we can follow up with the stuff Ryan asked for later, because I think that's longer form.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool.
Okay.
I will take this screen back over, I guess. Does that make sense?
Do you want me to? I think the next item is
Actually, yeah, you're the next item too.
it's the calendar. So let me mention that as well. So some folks have noted that the Google Calendar. So the Google Calendar works well for some folks and not for others. I think it. If you currently have a Google Calendar, I think it works well. If you don't, or at least some of us who are using Microsoft products, so Exchange, it's very difficult with the Google Calendar, at least as the way it is currently, to be able to add items from that calendar to your private calendar. There is no add to calendar option. And if you publish the calendar to get an ICS, then you get all of the items, all of the meetings. So it's hard to just add a meeting at a time. So, excuse me. So we've been looking at some other options, and one that we've been discussing is a calendar that's part of the list.io platform, which is the technology that we use for our mailing lists. And so from here, let's see, if I go to groups. Oh, sorry. I should have got to this page beforehand. Okay, so from here, there's a built-in calendar, and then we have a couple of, Lindsay has populated a couple of meeting items in this calendar. We don't have them all in here yet because we're still exploring. So from an item, you can, there is an ICS built right in. And so then you can click on that and then it can get added to your own calendar. And the series gets added, not just the individual meeting. So it feels like maybe it's a good neutral option for a calendar that, still gives us what we have in the Google Calendar, which is an overview of all the meetings, and then makes it easy to add items to your own private calendar. So
someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that iCals don't fetch resources. They only push, don't pull. So if there's a change to the calendar and you have this iCal, you won't know about the change. Am I wrong in that thinking?
What Lindsay had mentioned to me is that it takes about 24 hours, so it doesn't happen immediately, but it does. But that's something that that I can check into. So what I wanted to do today is just present this as an option. I don't want us to change without making sure that we're not giving up one set of issues for a different set of issues. So and this calendar might not be the best. There might be better ways to do it. So anyway, so there's a question about ICS files or iCalendar files and how quickly or if changes get updated.
Yep, otherwise no concerns for me. Seems reasonable.
Yeah, one of the things that wasn't clear to me when he was showing yesterday was how to just see all of the events. Like when I log in here, it shows me the events for groups that I'm a part of. But one of the things that we had set up nicely with the Google Calendar is anybody can just click on that link and see all of the working group events without actually having to join any of the mailing lists. It's not clear. It wasn't clear, at least to me from yesterday, whether or not that was still possible here, or if somebody has to first join the OSSF main to see everything. And then it kind of turns it into your calendar, which is just the things that you've subscribed to.
Yeah, I thought that there, okay, that's another good question. I thought Lindsay was saying there could be some way to pre-populate the calendar, so I had the impression we could work around that, but let me just note it now as a requirement. So, because I think it is, we want there to be a way that you can just click and see all of the meetings, regardless of whether you're signed up to the working group.
Silly question, but if the concern is an iCal, I believe Google Calendar lets you export an iCal file. And so if this works with Outlook, presumably Google Calendar also works with Outlook.
Yeah, so, and this might be, so possibly so here was the constraint there. So I think you can only export an iCal from Google Calendar, and correct me if I'm wrong, for the entire calendar. And so since we have all of the meetings on one calendar, if you export an iCal, you get all of the meetings. And if so,
I think that is correct. Yeah.
So if you only want to, get to one, then we'd have to break up all of the meetings in their own calendar, but then you lose the one view of all the meetings. So there are other ways we could try to do something automated in the background where we create calendars and then export iCals and then expose all the iCals. That gets a little complex too. So, all right. So what we want, if I just go back to requirements, so we want one calendar to view all meetings. We want it to be easy for individuals to add any specific meeting to their private calendar. And we're looking for the cleanest way to do that. So.
And don't need to sign in to view all the meetings.
Oh, that's good too.
I think that's what Dan was saying.
Yeah,
a
no
different version of what
sign
Dan
in.
was saying.
Oh.
Yeah, that like builds on it. No signing in and no having to sign up either for anything. So yeah, that would be great.
All right.
Yeah, and
Okay.
if there's a workaround, then I mean, we'll just need to identify that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right.
I think that's all I have.
Did you have this next one as well from the governing board, the security community governing board rep update?
I do, but I'll stop sharing my screen because I don't need screen sharing for that.
I can take back over for that.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, so Jennifer is working on a draft for a blog post. All right, so let me step back to the higher level. In our planning committee meeting yesterday, we noted that we don't currently have any self-nominations for that role. So the role is for someone from the security community to join the governing board, and we have one seat set aside for that. We did have a couple people say that they knew of people who were interested in joining, but there had been some concerns about we had set up the nomination form to be a spreadsheet, which means everyone sees everyone else, and some people felt a little uncomfortable about nominating themselves in a public way. So we decided on two things yesterday. One was to change the nomination form from a spreadsheet to a Google form, and Ryan has already done that. So that will address the concern that people want to be able to self-nominate privately. And then the second concern was, are we not giving quite enough time? Because I think previously our nomination period closed on Thursday of this week. So what we decided to do there is to extend the nomination period, and I don't have it right in front of me, but I think we extended it by 2 weeks.
The nominations are until the 23rd of October, and then the voting was until the 5th of November, I believe.
That sounds right. And then also Jennifer is working on a blog post, and our aim is to get that up today, I think. So we have a draft of it already, and we've iterated it a couple of times. So I think we're close on that. So we'll put the blog post on the OpenSSF website. Then we'll send out an email. We were going to have Dan send that out, but since he's not feeling well, we might have someone else send it.
Sorry, you mean Ryan?
Ryan, sorry. How are you feeling, Dan? I don't mean to project things on you. Sorry. Okay, so yes, so we'll get an email out, and the email can point to the blog post, and then we'd also like to have anyone from, on this call or others, governing board members or TAC members or, people from the working groups, feel free to, the other thing we're going to do is we're going to tweet on the OpenSSF Twitter. We'll tweet about this option. And then if others can help retweet or reach out so that we get a few, a few really strong, really great, engaged and motivated candidates. So that's what I have there. Jennifer, anything else to add?
Sure. So just on that note, the blog post, the purpose was to provide some information about like what the role entails, how long it runs for, all that kind of stuff, and some of our rationale, which I think is what I shared in that announcements thread last week. If people would like, and maybe I'll just take a quick temperature read here, I can send out a copy of it if anyone would like to add comments or edits today. I could send out an email to the TAC that contains the blog post if you guys want to look at wording. Let me know if someone would like that, and I'll send it to the group. Otherwise, we can just finalize publication later today. Is there anyone in particular that does want to see it? Otherwise, we'll just do it on our own.
Just go for it.
Sounds like people are pretty trusting. Thank you all. Okay.
Okay. Town hall meeting. I think this is just referring to the doodle poll that Kay sent out. Was that yesterday or today?
Yeah, so it's covered in that mail, but we are going to be doing a town hall meeting, which is an open meeting for all members, but anyone from the public can join as well. And in that, we'll talk about, we'll cover some of the things that we've covered in our press release. We'll also allow, we'll do updates from the governing board and the TAC, and then also allow each of the working groups to do an update on what's happening in their working groups, and then we'll leave time open for Q&A. So the doodle poll is to make sure that we are picking a time sometime during that week of November 9th when we can get as many of especially the working group leads available so that they can discuss what's happening in their groups.
I think we should be prepared to delay that depending on how disruptive the election is.
Yeah, I think that we did choose November 9th instead of the previous week because of the elections, but you're right, it could
Understood.
be right. It could be disruptive enough that that we might delay again. So I don't know. Do folks have a thought on that? We could say that we'll already delay.
I don't think we need to decide now. I think it's more just like if something happens, we should be ready to delay.
Okay. Point taken. Makes sense. All right.
All right. Someone's phone is ringing. Next one is update on consolidation of CII and OpenSSF initiatives. David Wheeler.
Okay. All right. If you don't mind, can I share my own screen? Dan, if you can.
Yeah, I have to stop.
Yeah, afraid so. So hopefully, so I thought it'd be simpler just to make a little deck and and present that way. Okay, so and I'm going to talk about CI consolidation, but in particular the CI best practices, which is the more complicated situation. So all the other CII projects seem to have transitioned smoothly. Basically, the NX course technically isn't CII, but I've been treating that way because that just seemed easiest, and that one is officially transitioned over to best practices. CI census and CI survey are over in the securing critical projects working group. Everyone seemed to agree that was a reasonable place for it. The complication is that the CII badge project is not is a little more complicated. So for those of you who don't know, I think most of you do, it identifies best practices and then implements a site so that projects can self-certify. So it includes a variety of automated measures to actually determine and measure this stuff. And I'm the lead. So two different working groups voted, and two different working groups both wanted as part of their working group. So it's good to be wanted, I think. So those two working groups are the best practices working group and the security threats working group. Now the fact that both of them wanted, I think we can at least declare, well, it's going to end up in OpenSSF somewhere. We don't know where yet. Both working groups agree to be able to have one home. That's just simpler. And we could create a separate working group for this, but there's really no appetite for that. I put the little quote there, we have enough meetings. So basically, because two working groups are proposing different things, it just seems like procedurally it needs to raise up to the TAC. And so I think whatever working group is the home for this thing needs adjudication from this. Now, originally when I proposed this in the agenda, it seemed like we needed adjudication pretty quickly because we were going to announce it in the press release. But I think now it's been decided that we're not going to announce specific homes. So the pressure to do this, make this decision is released a little bit, and we can wait until the working groups get more formalized. That said, it still seems like this is almost certainly going to require a TAC decision because both working groups view this within their scopes. So I think we need to at least raise the issue now, discuss it now. The TAC has all of the authority it needs to make the decision now or later, your choice. But I think it's important to at least discuss, even if the TAC decides not to make the decision right now. I just want to make sure that, rebranding this, probably eventually should say something other than CII, but I think that that's a separate discussion. We don't need to make that decision right now, or even very, very soon. I think it'd be better to wait for that as a separate action. So the next slides basically are two views from each of the working groups. So here's a quote from Chrome. I guess I could read this. The OpenSSF Developer Best Practices Working Group is focused on improving developers from all communities, produce better quality software, and so on. Okay. The next one here is the statement from Michael Scavetta, arguing for it being in the security threats working group, primarily because of its strong connection with metrics. I think at least in part because of its strong connection with metrics. Okay, so that's all I was going to present. The TAC can make a decision now. I think some of the pressure is off, but I think that the TAC is eventually going to need to make a decision, and so I want to at least raise it now, and now the TAC can choose whatever it wishes to do. So, Dan, back to you.
I mean, I've got some thoughts and opinions here, but I'd like to see
Please.
what anybody else has first. Anybody else
Absolutely.
have thoughts here?
Yeah. So my cursory view. So I took a project through the CII badge program.
Mm-hmm. Let me stop sharing.
I guess 2 years ago. That was OpenStack.
Okay.
Okay, and there was also the, what was it called? OPNFE. another Linux Foundation project. And it appears to me to be a very good match for best practices, because when I went through the badging program, it was all about best practices. It was about, it was not just threats per se, it was your website. Is it clear how to report a security vulnerability? Crypto types that you use, how you're, I'm sure there was some stuff around your releases and using semantic versioning. And so to me, it just seems very matched to best practices, from somebody that's not really given it a great deal of thought before this meeting, just off what I see in front of me.
Oh, it clearly, it's a sensible thing. I think now, my personal opinion, I think the security threats working group name is a little complicated, because when you start looking what they're actually doing, it's all about metrics. So, and I think that's, well, not all about, but a key part of that working group is focusing on metrics. And I think that's why it gets a little complicated. Both working groups think that makes sense for them.
I would say it's not really, my understanding is not really metrics, but metadata is what the security, identifying security threats working group is working on.
Okay.
If I can, my view on this is the best practices group seems to be focused on training and educating maintainers as to what are best practices they should follow. And the identifying threats working group seems to be focused on consuming information or metadata about projects and if they follow certain best practices. Neither of these right now has in its scope really creating that information, generating that information initially, which is effectively what this project is about. It's about getting maintainers to volunteer to provide that information in a documented, easy to access way. I think it probably fits slightly better in the first one, sorry, the
Best practices.
educational one.
Best practices.
Yeah.
Best practices one, yeah. I think it's slightly better in the best practices one, just because there is a lot of educational content and stuff that isn't just pure security. But it could really have a home in either.
So if I'm on the right, so I've just done a quick Google for CII. What's my search term? CII badge. And the landing page is CII Best Practices Badge Program. The Linux Foundation Core Infrastructure Initiative is a best practice badge, is a way for free Libra and open source software FLOSS projects to show they follow best practices. So best practices, if I do a Control F, it comes up 4 times. So I don't know, just love a bit of feedback.
I am leaning towards the best practices one, if that wasn't clear.
Let me put the link in. I'll drop the link into chat.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be weird to have a group called Best Practices and a program called the Best Practices Program and not have them be together, but that's not a great reason. I think a lot of what we're talking about is like what these groups are actually doing versus what the names and maybe even READMEs represent. One of the, I guess my suggestions and David's doc was to like have the working groups go through the exercise of filling out the goals and non-goals and scope section in the template that Ryan just created and then revisit, because maybe like we all just have slight misconceptions about what the working groups are actually doing or what they hope to be doing long term. But maybe we don't, maybe we all just do know exactly what they're hoping to do. And then there's a problem that they're hoping to do the same thing.
There's definitely a fair bit of overlap between the groups, I guess. So I'm on the side of thinking that it's a better fit for the threats and metrics group, simply because I think the dashboarding project, which is core to that threats and metrics group, is about measuring or otherwise observing properties of a given repository to give some kind of indication about security levels. And the CII best practices badge is, measuring things about a repository to give some indication about security levels. So I think the goals, like the core objectives as well as how those things are communicated and processed are very aligned between those groups. But again, I think that the argument about having a best practices badge and a best practices group as separate, and the idea that the best practices do relate to the things that are displayed on a dashboard are all relevant as well.
So just to echo what Jennifer said, and then add one slight additional factor to it. I have been,
and I know I'm getting a, we did work around SBOM. Where does SBOM sit? Because I see this as being a precursor to SBOM work.
Yeah, I kind of go there too. So, but then if I step back to customer level, what I would like for us to provide to customers is a way for them to, and when I say customers in this case, I mean, you know, GitHub as a customer or as a proxy for open source developers, and Microsoft as a customer, and anyone who wants to gate their consumption of software based on the security of the software. So what I want is for those customers, for them to have, you know, one way to get security information about open source software. And I think it would be a shame if we ended up having an open source badge project, which has one way of exposing the metadata that it captures, and a separate open source metrics project that has a different way of exposing its data, because that just makes it harder for the people who want to consume. And ultimately their goal is, you know, I want to understand the security properties about software before I bring it into my organization or into my project.
I actually don't think it's a bad thing to have two different things here. And I think that's slightly different audience, right? So the badge program right now might, for example, say you should have a contributing MD file, which you should. But that is not something that necessarily means the project is more or less safe. It might mean the project is more mature, project is better organized, but it does not mean that there's a security vulnerability in the project. And so I think there's, again, I don't want to dictate what these working groups should be doing. I could see the best practices working group actively engaging maintainers, actively going out and educating maintainers as to what is the right thing to do to follow best practices to increase your security, right? That is a different for me than consuming that information down the line. And ideally, the way to consume information would be mostly automated based on a core set of security metadata. That group might not directly go interact with maintainers and incentivize them to adopt those best practices.
Yeah, so
does that make sense?
It does, yeah. So when I went, so as I say, when I went through this with 2 projects before, the experience was educational. Do you see what I mean? So I was working through, we would look at the criterion. There'd be a certain action to investigate, and then I would then talk to somebody and say, well, this is what we do at present, so how could we improve this? It was very much a kind of an open communication thing rather than rendering our current state, if you see what I mean. So it just seemed to marry quite well with this developer outreach area, if that makes sense.
For the projects that I've taken through it, I have to agree that, yeah, the real benefit, at least for me going through, felt educational, and like it was the exercise of going through and reading all of these things and figuring out how to apply them to the specific type of software and project that I was working on, and then just attesting that I understood these things and would, you know, do my best to try to follow them going forward. It's kind of hard since a lot of them aren't really automatable or detectable, so it really is just taking the people at their word. A lot of them are, you know, detectable, and David's got a bunch of code there to look for things that, you know, can be found, but a lot of them are really just that you're stating that I've read and understand and agree with this best practice, and we'll try to do it for my project.
Yeah, so just to follow on from that, for me, it wasn't so much that I ticked off the boxes and got the badge. It was that I went through the process. and I learned going through that process.
Yeah, that's also been my experience. We just went through it a second time with another project that I'm on, and we explicitly did it as a group so that everybody was on the same page, and it was an educational task.
Oh, how'd that work?
It was good. I actually captured some feedback that I should figure out how to feed to you, which
Oh,
relates
please.
to my follow-on question, which is logistically, what is the outcome of this? I mean, are you moving a repo? Is it just a matter of sort of governance or oversight that the working group helps guide the project? Is there some, what's the tangible outcome regardless of which group it goes to?
I think the tangible outcome is primarily reporting to. I think, right now the CI best practices badge, once the CI became kind of moribund, is, we want to keep it going. And so but it'd be much better for it to have some people to report to who are examining it, making sure it makes sense, proposing new, improvements to it, reviewing changes to it. So I think it's that sort of thing. I haven't really thought that hard about moving the repo. Obviously, that's totally doable. But I think things like changing names and changing repos are down the road. The first step is where, does it have a home, and if so, where? I do want to make it clear that although I think it's easier to make specific proposal, I think it makes sense for either group. Either group has, in fact, you can hear the disagreement within the TAC. Both groups have some rationale for that. And I think either group would be a perfectly reasonable outcome.
So David, I think just to set the expectation, it is hands-on as well. From what I recall last time, you're going to get a lot of questions from people saying, well, I use MD5, but it's to check network packets have been constructed properly. There's no security context. So what should I do here? So I think anybody that is going to take this on should be mindful of, there's likely to be an expectation that there is an expectation that you would collaborate and work with people trying to get through the list.
Right. Now, I will say that in general, it hasn't been that bad. You're absolutely right. We have had to answer questions as folks go along. There has been a very strong effort to try to make it as clear as humanly possible. So, but so it hasn't been that onerous. But there have been, what do you mean by this kinds of questions? And I think those are inevitable with any kind of criteria. Okay.
So how do we want to go forward on this? We do have a couple other topics.
Yeah, what I would propose, and it's up to you guys, but all of you, but I would propose, originally we had to make this decision ASAP in order to do the press release. And that was the original reason to put this on the agenda. We don't have to do that for press release time. I think a decision will have to be made eventually. But what I propose is I've done what I think is the key step, which is there's an issue. I think the TAC eventually need to resolve it. And if nothing else, while the working groups are working out their scopes, this should be one of the questions for the TAC is, hey, does this help us make this decision? So I think I would just say for right now, I won't put this in everybody's heads. This is a decision that will need to be made eventually. And go from there. Does that sound like a reasonable step forward?
Yes, sir. I mean, I'm happy to even vote now, but if folks want more time to digest both groups, and
TAC has every authority to make the decision right now if you want to do that.
So there's a project that I'm working. So I help out in the Identifying Security Threats working group, and there's a project that I'm working on, which is sort of understanding the differences between the best practices badge, the security metrics project, and then Google had proposed another kind of similar sounding project, which is a security scorecard. And so what we're working on in that group is gathering information about each of those projects, what the goals of the project are, what the target audience is, what the scenario is, and then just kind of rationalizing how those things come together or not. So it could be interesting as part of that effort. You know, once people kind of have a chance to look more deeply at what the projects are trying to do, I think that information could be valuable to inform a decision. So that's I guess that's a long way of saying it seems reasonable to not make a decision today, but we'll let it wait a little bit and have the working groups look at it some more and then come back with a proposal a little later.
Any other thoughts?
I'm noting we have 9 minutes, and I didn't mean to take over the whole rest of the meeting. Sorry. I mean, discussion is great though.
All right, so what's your plan, David? Let's just wrap this up.
Yep. So
Okay.
I think my plan is, I think for today, what I need to do is do what I've just done, which is, hey, there's a decision that will need to be made, and let's move on for now and come back probably within, well, 2 to 4 weeks once the scopes have been worked out, and then hopefully that will make the decision a lot clearer.
Sounds good. All right, the next topic on here, we'll just go through a little quickly. This is working group updates. I assume this was a time for all the people from working groups to give status updates. I don't think we really have enough time to go through those, so type them in here if you can, and if you do want to give a quick highlight from a working group, jump in, but we don't necessarily have to do a full roundtable from everyone.
Can I propose that the default here is to be async? That the default should be an update on the issue or something like that, not at this meeting.
Yeah, I would agree. We can have people fill this out ahead of time, hopefully. I think that's what you said. You cut out there a little bit. There was some static.
Yeah, and people can like follow the issues or whatever that they're interested in, rather than spending time here. But yeah.
Sounds good.
Or just post them to the TAC mailing list.
Yeah, and if anybody has something they want to say that they're really excited about, go ahead. Otherwise, we'll move on to this next one. Review remaining PRs issues on the TAC repo. Propose closing 7 and 26. When I open these, they're taking me to new tabs. Let me see if I can switch what I'm sharing. Actually, I'm not sharing anything now.
Yeah, I took the liberty to go through and try to pre-triage some of these. So those two look like they're ready to be closed, and then just shine a little light on the next one that might have been stalled. And then the last one probably also can be closed.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, so I have 7 that I'm sharing here. Yep, I think this one's fine to close. I can always reopen it. 26 was the license CLAs. David pointed out that we do have default licensing requirements. But I think, I'm not sure. So this is basically the doc that you linked is the charter for each working group, David, which is kind of like a boilerplate thing that got copied. So there's really nothing preventing a working group from going ahead and changing this because it lives in their repos.
I think that's, I mean, not a lawyer, but I think that's correct.
Yeah. So these aren't actually filled out things yet. So I guess, do we want to set something default at the OpenSSF level? The one that and we can kind of discuss this in the issue, but yeah, it says we default to Apache 2. Do we care if people change from that? How should that happen, etc.?
I believe the correct answer is a working group can specify a different license. It just has to be approved by the TAC. I would recommend against using, and as I mentioned here, I would recommend against requiring CLAs.
Right.
You know, that is just a way to prevent project participation.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I don't think we can quite close that one yet. What else? We've got 18 here. this the blocked one, Dan?
Yeah. I think that one was waiting on a reply on the other one. I don't know what it was now.
Okay, yeah, I still haven't seen the security tooling one show up on the calendar yet, so we can reach back out.
Yeah, I think he said he didn't have permissions. When you look at
Oh.
issue 9 for the tooling.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Check on that. Anything else that we should discuss here with the group?
So
All right, then. Any other topics in the last 4 minutes?
If we can circle back real quickly to the number 26, the license CLA policy.
Sure.
Yeah, you know, we should figure out what we need to do for CLAs and licensing. You know, I guess, you know, the default licenses are Apache 2.0 and CCSA. There's no particular requirements for CLAs. I personally recommend against them, but there are sometimes legal reasons you should have them. Does anyone have an objection to or plan? Because I think we can close this out. If somebody ever says we need a CLA or we need a different license, that working group can just raise it to the TAC and for approval. So I don't think we need to do anything different unless somebody thinks that they need to do something special now.
Well, okay, so my question is, where does it say that our default for the
Technical
OpenSSF is
charter
Apache?
it's the technical charter for the OpenSSF section 6. And I have a link to that in the, if you see,
Right.
if you'll notice, if there's a link to that in number 26, and if you drop down to section 6, that's where it lists Apache, DCO, CC attribution.
Right, so I think this is the wrong document, actually. I think we might need to move this up into something at the TAC level, because this is a document that basically just got copied into each working group that's kind of complete boilerplate and isn't really filled out or relevant to many of them. So like any of the working groups could just delete this file or change it to say whatever they want. Like this talks about how working groups will elect their own technical steering committees and things within working groups. Sorry, I think I'm sharing the wrong tab.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I think
this
this
probably isn't the right place for that to live.
Okay.
That's
Should
where
we? So I think there's a question of where for it to live. The second question is like, should we provide a template for all of the working groups?
That is the template provided to the working groups.
But I think to Dan's point, that's not a very useful template for most working groups.
yeah, I think that might be captured in another issue about
Yeah.
some of the structure for the working groups. But all the member companies have signed a participant agreement that has a charter in it, and I'm trying to skim live, and I don't see the licensing in there like I thought it was. So that
Yeah, I thought it had that, but I would have to do the same thing you're trying to do right now. Just
Yeah, I think
live read in 2 minutes.
There's too many things called charter flying around. Yeah, the thing that all the companies signed is in OSSF/foundation, and there's a PDF. I'm not sure if it mentions anything about licensing there.
Yeah, I thought it did, but now I can't find it, so it might be a gap.
All right, I'll leave a little summary there on what I think we might need, what my kind of phrase better than I did about what we might need to change if we do want to have a default license policy. And that wraps up our time for today. Thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.